Atkinson Hall, and welcome to another episode of Anyone Can Draw, Paint, and Create. Since we're back to phase one, I thought I would go back to the beginnings too and work just with graphite today. I know we've been traveling through a lot of more advanced drawing and painting skills, but today we're just sticking with the pencil. Not the lowly pencil, however. As you'll see, the pencil can be a wonderful artistic medium in and of itself. It doesn't need any help, really. It's just how you use them and what kind of pencil you actually use. In addition to that, we're going to look at playing with reflections on metal. Now, we've done glass and we've done the high contrast shadows on marbles, but that was more for using color and blending and showing reflection on glassy objects. Today, we're using metal. But don't worry, you don't have to have anything fancy schmancy around. As long as you have an eating utensil, you're good to go. So instead of playing rock, paper, scissors, we can play fork, knife, spoon. And we're also going to be using a dish. Not that the dish ran away with a spoon. Sorry, bad humor. But we're going to be using a dish to create our format. So we're not just drawing a utensil floating around on a large piece of paper. Now, you don't have to use a utensil. Anything metallic you have lying around will do. It could be jewelry. It could be big old mixing bowl here. It could be any kind of ice cream scoop or something else that you might happen to have around the house that's shiny. Pretty much anything. Musical instruments, personally my favorite. And if I still had my Barry sax, yes, I played that all the way through college, I would definitely use that today, but no one else would have access to a Barry saxophone, so got to keep it where everybody can be. So I am using a spoon. I think everyone has a spoon, but the spoon shape is cool because it's an oval and we're going to be drawing in a circular format. So we're kind of almost repeating a rounded shape in the drawing with our format. Let's get started. I'm using a plate that I happen to have lying around, and you can use whatever thing you have that's circular that you can trace. It could be a paper plate, it could be a cup, whatever you want. You just have to decide what size you want. And I'm going to trace my shape with a darker pencil, actually, so that you can see it a little bit better than that. And I'm going to go over the different kinds of pencils in a minute. So there we go. I have my format for where I'm going to place my drawing of my spoon. But before I do my spoon, I wanted to talk a little bit about drawing pencils because a lot of folks have asked me, what does it mean when I see something like a 2H on my pencil or a 4B or whatever that might be? So let's take a look at what those do. So I've got all my drawing pencils in a row from the darkest to the lightest, but they all look the same, don't they? Exactly. The difference is how much graphite is deposited from the pencil when it's used. And that's what gives them those different numbers. B is a soft lead pencil and H is a hard lead pencil. Now, anytime you were ever in school and they said, take out your yellow pencils or your number 2 pencils, what it really was an HB, which is this one, and it's a middle of the road pencil. So that's your everyday all-purpose pencil and probably the one you have lying around the house, so you can use that one, that's fine. And if that's all you have, you can get a lot of really dark darks and light lights with that pencil. And I know that sounds repetitive, but in drawing, it definitely means the darkest of the darks to the lightest of the lights. On a grayscale value, it would be black to white and all points in between, as we'll see. So I'm just going to show you on paper what these do using the same amount of pressure so you can actually see the difference, because no matter how hard I try on a 9H, I am never going to get as dark as a 9B. So let's see what these pencils can do. Here's my 9B. This is the darkest pencil. This is really dark and you don't have to press hard to get a dark line. I'm just going to do some shading because it's easier to see, and I'll hold this up. But if I press even harder, I can get almost a very black, pure graphite dark. So that's 9B. The polar opposite is a 9H. And unless you have a drawing set, you probably don't have a 9H lying around, but that's okay. We can make most of these by hand pressure. But just to show you, you hear how scratchy that is? That's not anything other than the fact that this pencil, and I'm pressing super hard, no matter how hard I press, that's it. there's a huge difference between the 9B and the 9H. These are the most distinct. So what this does is take the guesswork out of how much pressure you have with your hand. If you have a hand that doesn't provide as much pressure for you, you might want to invest in 1 or 2 B pencils, maybe not a 9B, but a 4B or a 2B, because those will allow you to get your darks without pressing too hard and really hurting your hand. Conversely, if you're heavy-handed, you might want to invest in some H pencils, and by invest, I mean they're about $1.50 each. You can get them online. Just because this way, no matter how heavy-handed I am, I can still get my light lights. So those were the 9s. As we work our way down, the difference is a little less obvious, but here is a 4B. And I'm pressing just as hard, and there's a subtle difference in the darkness. And then my 4H, sounds like a club, is going to be a little bit darker than the 9B, excuse me, the 9H, but it's never going to get as dark as the 4B. So 4B, 4H, all a little darker than these top ones in the darkest, and all a little lighter. So in the light part. So here we go with 2B and 2H. I know, I'm gonna get corny again, but to be or not to be, there's so many fun things you can do with these pencil names. So my 2B, no matter how hard I press, there's not a big difference between 2B and 4B, so that's why I don't recommend buying both. Pick one, they're about the same. And then 2H is gonna definitely be darker than any of my other H pencils. And actually, you can see as they get closer together, there isn't that much difference in the pencil, period, whether it's an H or a B. And then right in the middle, that lovely HB pencil, which is a combination of both, and frankly looks exactly like a 2B and a 4B. So here's what we have. You can see the most dramatic difference is the 9H and the 9B. So if you like to do a lot of drama with your drawings, maybe one of each of the higher numbers of an H and a B. But once you get down to 4B, 4H, 2B, 2H, and HB, there's not a lot of difference. And frankly, the old number 2 pencil, that HB, you could do the whole drawing we're about to do with just that pencil. I'm going to leave my spoon on the paper because I just want you to be able to see exactly what I'm looking at while I draw it. So I have my circular format, which is going to be the tracing I did of the plate. And a format is just simply the shape of whatever you're drawing inside. So if you were just using a piece of paper, you have a rectangular format. And you can use squares or triangles or anything you want. But I thought we would try this circular format since we're using an object that's circular. The other key to this is you don't have to draw the whole thing. We're just going to be drawing part of the spoon because I really like this part better, the actual spoon part, not the handle so much. And to start drawing, I'm going to just use the same pencil you might have at home, that HB, because it's a pretty good beginner pencil. Now this spoon is in my way because I'm left-handed, so I'm going to have to kind of come up and over just to draw in that shape. And again, I'm not doing the whole spoon, I'm just doing part of it. And then exactly what I see of the handle. And I might do something with the shading of this background. I really don't know yet. I haven't decided on my drawing so much. Now I'm going to go back in and make a few corrections where I see more of the spoon. And the shadow is important. So if you're following along at home, wherever you set this down, if it's on a table, a placemat, whatever, draw the shadow as you see it because it kind of distorts and it can be a very interesting element to your picture. If I didn't sketch in what I'm seeing of the shadow of my spoon, this wouldn't get nearly as interesting, and these shadows, highlights, and all the reflections on my spoon wouldn't make as much sense. Now we're ready to draw in the shadows. This might be similar to what we did with glass. And here's my eraser. I'm just gonna take out the areas where I went around and around. I'm a creature of habit from my old gesture drawing classes in college where you made a lot of lines before you decided on which one you wanted to use. So I'm drawing in everywhere I see a shadow, which is most of the handle, And everywhere I see a really bright highlight and I'm drawing in that shape. This is just as much of a puzzle. I'm gonna take out some of that extra line here as the marbles. So if you really thought those marbles were a challenge, here's another good challenge for you. And we're going up a little bit here, and I see a little bit of a highlight in here, so I'm drawing that in. So you can see these are shapes. Now here's where it gets really interesting. There's teeny tiny highlights along the edge of the spoon that correspond to where the shadow is. So I'm gonna leave that line now, but I'll erase it out later so that we can actually see that as a highlight and not a line. And then I happen to have a pretty dark triangle, whatever that's reflecting. And remember, the spoon's reflecting absolutely everything it sees around it. And then another line here. Actually, this is longer. Sometimes you just move a little bit, the light changes a little bit, and you gotta go back and redo. Okay, so I've got my outline. See if you can see this, because if I pick this up, I'm gonna lose my spoon, but I have my outline drawing. Now it's time to shade it in. To start, I'm going to use my darkest pencil that I have. So if you've got them, use them. If you don't, that's okay. You can just do the HB, but I'm gonna go with my 9B, the super dark pencil. I always like the really dark leads. I felt like there's just a richness to those. And I like things kind of more dramatic in my artwork, so that's why. And I'm just kind of coloring this in. Now remember, initially this is going to look, for lack of a better term, probably terrifying. But we're just trying to draw in what we see, the darkest darks and the lightest lights. So don't be afraid to press hard. If everything was all the same degree of tone, it would be pretty boring. And we're trying to make this kind of interesting and give ourselves practice in what we're seeing, because drawing is all about draw what you see, not what you know. Because trust me, if I was just drawing what I know about a spoon, my brain would have decided I was done before I even started just drawing that little shape and be like, no, okay, that looks enough like a spoon to us. Let's move on, something else, we're bored. And that's not what you want to do. In drawing, it's all about observation. We will get down to the point of fantasy drawings and drawing what you think you see as far as in your inner mind, but right now is not that time. We're still working on trying to get the basics. Okay, I see a little line here and then a shadow and a highlight. So if you were following along, that is exactly where I wanted to be. And now I can switch to a less dramatic, darker pencil. This is going to be my 2B, but again, just press a little lighter with your regular pencil. And I am just going to shade in this area that I see is kind of a medium silver tone. Now, depending on what you pick to draw, you're going to have either a lot of really dark highlights and shadows, or excuse me, dark shadows and bright highlights, yikes. Or you're going to have a lot of very soft, subtle variations. It depends on the finish of the metal. So my spoon is very shiny, but if I went back to this metal bowl, which is more of a satin finish, you can see everything's very soft and subtle. So again, if you're drawing what you see, then that's what you see. So it's okay to have it the way it looks for real, not what your mind is thinking it should look like. Okay, so I see a little bit of a darker line right here on my spoon. I'm gonna draw that in, and I'm gonna then switch to the HB pencil. Having too many pencils can be a pain. As you can see, you have to always find them. And I'm just going with my shadow. Now the shadow, you don't want to have a lot of directional lines that go in different directions, rather. Just go pick one way and then stay in that lane, as they say. Just kind of go for getting that shadowing, because we're really holding the pencil almost horizontal to the page and just kind of working our way down to where I see the shadow actually meets up with the spoon. And this will also help by showing this white area, give the idea of this spoon having that bend, that roundedness to it. And I'll just kind of come around here. And then once you get it in one way, just go one other direction, because we're gonna blend this all in with a blender or a Q-tip or a piece of paper towel, whatever you have around the house. But for me, I'm gonna use a blender, and I just wanna have the graphite going a couple different directions so that it blends in pretty nicely. Now you're probably saying, this doesn't look anything like a spoon. This looks terrifying, and it does right now. But before we take a little break from this, I'm just gonna show you, I'm using the blender to blend in my shadow. And a lot of this drawing metal is gonna be done with our handy dandy eraser, because that eraser, remember, it's also a drawing tool. So I'm just going to blend in here my absolute darkest areas, and then take my blender and start going in and getting all of this kind of smoothed out a little bit. This is personal preference. If your aesthetic is to keep things rough edged, by all means do it. It is up to you. And you can see I'm losing some of my darker areas, but I'll go back in and get those in a minute. And then I'm using my blender to actually draw in areas that I didn't see the first go round, just to kind of smooth everything out a little bit. Because after all, this is supposed to be a smooth spoon. I happen to have rough spoons, by the way, because I don't know if anyone else has experienced the joy of the spoon in the garbage disposal or the sink disposal. It's not pretty. So yeah, those spoons aren't around anymore, but they do get rough, so it's possible to have one. Okay, so now I am going to carefully move my spoon and hold this up so you can see we're not nearly done. It's hard to discern whether this is a spoon or a leaf, but I'm going to go back and refine some of my shaded areas and then be back to show you what to do with the eraser. All right, I've had some time to work on this spoon and get some shading in, but you can see it still looks a little more like a leaf than a spoon. So I'm going to show you how to use the eraser to really fine tune this drawing, and then just add some subtle details and we'll be finished. So what we're doing now, and I carefully had moved my spoon off the page, so I have it back pretty close if I'm following my highlights to where it was, is use the eraser. Now the key with your eraser is you want to use a sharp edge on your eraser. So if your eraser's worn down, it's all round, then just cut it with a pair of scissors. These cut really easily. Or use an old pencil eraser, because the older it is, the harder it is, and it might give you a nice clean edge. So as I can see here on my spoon, move this down a little bit, there's a highlight that runs all the way across, and I don't have that here. So what I'm going to do is use my eraser and start to erase out some of these highlights. And the key with metal or things that are metallic is to have some of the parts not outlined. We just imply that there was an edge there by the virtue of the shadow around it. And then I can see under here, it's pretty light where the spoon actually rounds up into under that shadow, but then as it tapers back down again. But here's where I really wanted to get some highlights. There's a few dings from my light, which is overhead. So I have to erase that all back out, the little sparkly dots. And you can use a smaller eraser. I'll go back in and fix some of that a little bit. But I'm starting to draw in my highlights with the eraser. And then where it's a little too textury for metal, use the side of your eraser, if you have it, or if not, a blending tool, and just kind of lightly rub over everything. This will start to unify the surface and make it look less choppy, because we're trying to give it more of a sheen, a metallic sheen. I might even go over my highlights and then erase some of them back out. But this is kind of unifying the surface and flattening it down. Now I can use another edge of my eraser and go back in and draw in these really nice light highlights that I see along the edge of the spoon. And right up here, there's a little lip edge that needs to get a highlight. And you can see as I'm drawing in these highlights, the spoon starts to take on a more 3D shape. Sometimes what you don't have with not having shading is more important than all the shading that you do, because you really need to try to simulate the shape of everything and only add the highlights where you actually see them. Don't go overboard, but on the other hand, don't be afraid to make something disappear into the background, like right up here on the top where it does. And then this edge is light. So the only way I could show a light edge is to add a little shadow around the outside. So that's what I'm going to do here in a moment before we finish this drawing off. So I'm going to add this shadow here. There's more of a highlight here, but I'm going to erase it down flatter so that it doesn't get too sharp edged and go back to looking a little more like an organic plant and less like a metallic surface. Okay, I think we pretty much have it here. There's another little highlight on the edge of the spoon. Now I can go back in with my lighter pencil if you have it, or if not, just press lighter and add these teeny little details because there's a little hard edge right here. It's okay to have hard edges. A little bit of a hard edge here. There's a little edge along this side of the spoon. So if you can see what we're doing here, I'm just going back in where the eraser might have made things just a little too wide. And leave these things alone where they are. Here, I'm just double checking basically. There's a little bit of a shadow here, but not much of one, just to kind of give it a little bit of oomph. And now to show this edge on the outside, we can take our pencil, and I would use a softer pencil, so I'll use a 2B, and just kind of give a light little tone along the edge, not much, and not around the whole circle. You don't have to color the whole circle in if you're seeing a light edge. I just want to show you how you can handle that. So just on this side of the spoon, oops, got a little too much graphite there, but that's okay, we can blend it out. So yeah, the less sharp your pencil is for this, the better. But I'm just roughly toning in my circle, just with a light tone. Pretty hard to see, but you'll see the difference when we take the eraser along this edge and erase out that spoon. Now it's a little subtle. Then I can take my blending tool, which can be a Q-tip, remember, or any other device. You might have a piece of paper towel, a sponge, cotton ball, anything soft will work. And I'm just kind of roughing in this side of the spoon on the circle and just going in a bunch of different directions so I don't have too many lines. I'm going to go back into this and erase it back out again so you can really see the difference on that edge. And this also can help define your shape of your object a little bit too. So now I'm going to go back in. Yeah, now you can see it a little bit better and get this nice edge to my spoon. And I see here, it just needs to come down a little bit. Again, all good artists talk to themselves. It's just what we do. This just needs to be a little softer in the base of the spoon. So I'm going around in a circle and blending with my eraser. And I think pretty much that's it. We have our spoon. So there's our spoon drawing. And you can see with metal, the key is just to get the shadows and the highlights as much as possible, and don't be afraid to erase teeny tiny little light areas. Those are what really make the spoon pop and look like it's sitting off the page. Also, try a circular format or a triangle, whatever you might want to do. The key is to learn how to try to draw something metallic. It doesn't have to be an eating utensil, so look around for whatever might interest you and give it a try. It could even be the keys to your apartment or a car. They're all fun things to try to draw. They all give your brain the stimulation to see tiny little shapes and how they interrelate to create an object. And a lot of drawing is all about exactly that, seeing the little shapes within the big picture to create a piece of artwork. It's all called representational drawing and observational drawing, so that you're actually drawing what you see. We'll get into the more experimental types down the road, but until then, stay safe and be well, Vincent Hall. I'll see you next week with another episode of Anyone Can Draw, Paint, and Create.